Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine, Taylor-Klaus, and Diane Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults.
Hi everyone, Elaine and Diane here, and we know that you want your complex kids to grow up to be happy and independent, and yet you're not always sure how or when to help with that.
In this podcast, we'll encourage you to collaborate with all kinds of complex kids and support them in navigating life and learning.
And we'll interview leading experts from around the world, as well as parents in our own community, talking about how training for parents actually helps these complex kids.
We'll talk about the issues we hear parents struggling with all the time and how a coach approach can support and empower your amazing young people.
We won't tell you what to do. We're going to help you figure out how. So let's move on to the next conversation. Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. Diane and I are here today because this is super fun to talk to Nikki and Pete, and we couldn't pass the opportunity up to give it to bring the gang all here.
Yes.
So we're super excited for a conversation with Nikki and Pete, who are ADHD management gurus extraordinaire, and we'll find out more about them.
And podcaster extraordinaires as well.
That's right. And the authors of the new fabulous book, Unapologetically ADHD. So we'll talk about that, I am sure. But welcome, folks. We are so glad y'all are here.
I was told this is supposed to be a 20 to 25 minute podcast. We'll see what we can do about that.
Yeah, with all four of us here, it might actually be longer than that. You never know.
We've got some time management stringents on one side and a couple of ADDers on the other side. So
I wish you good luck and Godspeed.
So
we're professionals here. Don't try this at home.
That's right. Okay, process. So should we start with a little bit of backstory? Like, how did you guys get where you are doing what you're doing in the world?
Yeah, well, so I'll start. My name is Nikki Kinzer, and I am a certified ADHD coach and founder of Take Control ADHD. And Pete and I actually have been friends prior to us ever working together. So our families have known each other for a long time. And when I switched my business, well, actually it was prior to that, when I decided to start an organizing business is when I reached out to Pete and I said, hey, I think you do something with websites. Could you help me put up a website? And because I want to start this professional organizing business. And he thought it was a great idea. And he said, yeah, I can help you do that. And he's been with me ever since day one. He's been a part of this journey. And it was in about, I think, 2011, 12 is when I decided to focus more on ADHD coaching. And we switched our podcast from Taking Control the ADHD Podcast to Taking Control the ADHD Podcast.
The other way. Yeah. Take Control the organizing podcast.
Oh, did I say? See, I'm so used to saying it.
I know.
We went from Taking Control the organizing is
Taking
now
Control the ADHD Podcast.
Yes. Thank you. See,
and has been for many years.
For many years.
You're not even going to find the other thing.
You're not even going to find it. Yeah. It's so old. So we've been podcasting for a long time and been working together for a long time. And this opportunity came up to, hey, would you guys want to write a book? And we had to think about it for a while. And then we did. And we were like, yeah, let's do that. And it was important that the book was alike our podcast. And that's what a lot of it is.
So you started off with Pete as your web developer. What shifted so that it became Nikki and Pete in conversation with each other about ADHD?
Well, so the organizing podcast, because I was first a podcaster, right? I'd been podcasting since 2006. And so Nikki came to me and said, I think I've been approached to do maybe a radio show. And I said, no, you're not going to do a radio show. We're going to do a podcast. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And she said, okay, whatever. I mean, whatever you want to do, that's fine. So we did this podcast and she didn't know anybody was listening to it at all until we had thousands of listeners. And so it was a nice kind of way to introduce the world to the thinking of, organizing and structure and time. And it just so happened that I also had been diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. Now, I hadn't told Nikki that when she broached me and said, I think we need to make it an ADHD podcast. I said,
seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
You'll never guess who has ADHD and two thumbs and looks like this guy. And so it was just a really lucky match that we happened to have a partnership where I could discuss the lived experience of an adult with ADHD, and Nikki could just, teach me every week. And it's been a great partnership.
A terrible way to learn. I know.
Yeah, right? It's awful.
Well, and actually, that's the direction I was going to go, because you guys have had so many conversations on your podcast. You hear from your listeners all the time. What are some of the things that you think podcast listeners who are tuning in about ADHD most want to hear about?
Good question.
Well, I think a lot of them are looking for the quick hits, right? They're looking for the tips and tricks and things that they can change in their lives today that'll make a difference, immediately in the next hour, tomorrow,
right,
this week. And generally, we sort of talk about that. There are a lot of shows that offer those kinds of structural tips, but most of the time when they come to us and they arrive in our community, they're arriving on a shallow boat of shame where they already feel bad about how they're living their lives and who they've let down in the last hour, week, day. And so, I think what we try to do is balance the structural tips with the "you're welcome here" message, right? It's okay. We all have felt bad. Some of us feel bad right now, and tomorrow we're going to feel bad again. And along the way, we're just going to try to adapt and do so with a spark of joy. If there's something we can find that is just a little bit joyful, even when things aren't going great, then maybe we're putting a wedge into somebody's life that allows them to see something with a little bit more warm light and not a lot of gray.
And let's distinguish that from what brings them joy.
Yeah. Right.
We're not talking about that.
No. And I think it's feeling understood, that they can hear us talking and they feel understood, that they don't have to explain because we're explaining it, on the show as we're talking. And it's a nice mix because I have the coach, kind of, here's the how-tos, but then Pete comes in being very vulnerable and really sharing his experiences, and people, really get that right away too and feel like they're being heard and understood, and that sense of community.
There's almost safety in coming for the tips. It's like this sort of, they come for the tips, but they, it's like they don't realize, or some of them realize they secretly really want that permission to, to acknowledge just how hard it is and some of the shame that comes along with it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pete.
Not to sort of undersell the role of podcasting. As we do some video too, and video is great, but there is a sort of intimacy that you build with someone. And I'll say this as a fan of other podcasts, a long-term fan of other podcasts. There's a sort of intimacy in the relationship that you build in that space between your headphones and your brain. And I think every episode we do, we're trying to just at least acknowledge that the people who are coming to listen to our show, the long-term listeners, are our friends and have developed a sort of sense of trust. And that, I think, with whatever podcast you're listening to, that's a real gift that you get to develop that relationship. And before it turns into the dark parasocial relationship, it can be a really nice relationship where you learn from somebody that you build a trusting relationship with. And that's what we try to be. And I know that I am as a fan.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm hearing here is that your trust with each other allows an intimacy that invites people to trust you, which creates an intimacy, and it kind of compounds and expands from there. I was thinking about, Diane and I, similarly, different, but similarly, right? Where the dynamic between the two of us, one with ADHD and one without ADHD, we were doing a webinar earlier, and one of the comments was, it's so interesting to watch the two of you present. Mm-hmm. And it's like that, I think, similarly with the two of you, it's that the dynamic feel is so real and it's so authentic that it allows people to let their guard down and feel safe and feel seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't talk about this all that much. I think I mentioned it publicly once, but my friendship with Nikki is one of those incredibly valuable things on a very personal level. In many ways over the last 20 years, I've learned to develop really great friendships with women because of my relationship with Nikki. It is just a real light in my life beyond the business stuff that we do together and the podcast. I hope that comes through at least.
Yeah, I think it does. And so brings me to, so the people listening to us right now, are parents of what we call complex kids and the professionals who support them. And similarly, they're listening for the connection, the authenticity, the intimacy of insight, right? What's going to come up in this conversation that can be the gem that they take forward with them to make their life a little bit better, a little bit easier this week, or as you say, this hour, this day, this week, right? So I'm curious what's bubbling up for you two in terms of, if you take that moment to exhale and think about, what do I want people to feel right now, to think about and be with right now? What's coming up?
That's great. It really comes, and this is going to sound so cheesy, but it comes to
we love cheesy. Do cheesy.
Okay. It's the title of the book, Unapologetically ADHD. That has been our theme in the last 6 months, is how do you live your life and stop apologizing for everything all the time? You don't have to say you're sorry you're late. You don't have to apologize that something's taking you longer than what you expected it, or that the plan didn't go as well as you thought, or that your child, didn't have a great day when you were really hoping they were going to have a great day, but it's really learning about your ADHD, partnering with your ADHD. This goes with parents who have kids who have ADHD for sure. I have one of those children. So does Pete. And being able to also provide them a space where they can be safe and comfortable and know that, they made a mistake and mom isn't going to hound it down, okay, we made a mistake. What can we do to do something different? I have an example. My daughter was asked to walk our neighbor's dogs every Wednesday. And the very first Wednesday that she was supposed to do it, she forgot. This was just a couple of weeks ago, and she felt horrible. She's like, they're not going to trust me that I first Wednesday and I didn't do it. And I was like, you know what? I understand you feel horrible, but it's okay. We all make mistakes. You contacted her. She knows what's going on. Where do we have it in the alarm? Do we need to do a sticky note? And then we go back to kind of how do we need to manage this so that we don't do it again? But I'm not going to make her feel bad, right? So it's partnering with what's happening and hopefully avoiding some of that shame that is so easy to fall into when things like that happen.
Go ahead, Pete.
I think that's where my thinking goes to. And I think a lot of it comes out of just talking so much about my younger experience with ADHD. It actually started some years ago. My wife is a speech language pathologist, and I was working on a video project for her company, and I was interviewing people as adults who had speech paths when they were children. And one of the gentlemen said it was horrible. They shoved me in a closet to do therapy with brooms and cleaning supplies, and expected me to really be excited about learning how to do my R's.
Right.
The same thing happens with ADHD, obviously. My youngest relationship with ADHD personally was in middle school, watching a kiddo with profound hyperactive ADHD, and how he was a model of all that all the educators and parents thought was bad and scary. And if you have ADHD, they give you special devices that you have to type into, and they put you in different spaces, and they send you small rooms to give you extra time to do stuff. I didn't know it was extra time. Everything I learned about ADHD was punitive. And I think the message for me is, remember the baggage that you are packing for your kids for 20, 30, 40 years from now, because they're going to carry it their entire lives, the baggage that you allow them to pack today as seventh graders. And that to me has been incredibly sort of profound awakening, just as I, watch my own kids leave the nest, and watch the baggage that they're taking from me. What are we saddling our kids with? Demonstrating by how we get them support, and what that support looks like.
Diane, it looks like you're going to say something.
Yeah, no. And what was coming up is and I don't want to diminish what you just said, because it is so important. And I also don't want our parents to feel guilty, because so many of us, when we don't know what to do, we inadvertently do things that that end up being hard. So go ahead, Elaine.
Well, that's kind of what I was going to say. It's like, so my kids are all young adults now, right? They're 23 through 30. And at this moment, they're actually all in town in the same space, which is rare. And it's so fascinating because we've had conversations about this. It's not whether you're going to screw up your kids. It's just how, right?
Yeah,
right.
So it's not that they're not going to have baggage for the next 25 years. It doesn't matter what there's going to be something. I think what I'm hearing you saying, Pete, and what that reminds me of is how important it is for us to be conscious of what we can minimize in terms of baggage, so that what's left and the stories they make up about what we did, when you kind of go, that's not how it happened, right? They're going to happen, right?
Everybody gets those stories.
Everybody gets them. But the story you use, the shallow boat of shame, right? If we can keep it shallow, right? And to Diane's point, if we can deal with not just minimizing their shame, but minimizing our shame.
Right. Right. And, I'll add to that, because you're absolutely right. And that it's not so much the fact that we're going to screw up, but also how soon we're able to recognize that and change gears, right? And just be able to talk about it. I wasn't able to talk about my ADHD as a kiddo until 3-4 years ago, it feels like, with my mom, right? As a septuagenarian now. That's decades after it would have been useful to be able to share those insights and to learn about myself and learn about my family in a way that I had never learned. I didn't get to talk about my dad's ADHD until after he died. Yeah, right. Then it's too late. I could have had an incredible relationship with my dad, one that I hope I have rectified with my own kids who live with ADHD by seeing me live with ADHD, right? All we're doing is saying, let's shine a light on the things that we have been ashamed of in the past, both in how we learn and how we parent. And that's an important thing to shame hates the sun. Shame hates the sun.
And the other thing that I just want to highlight in what you just said, Pete, because you're an adult and you're a very self-aware adult. And a lot of times our kids aren't able to articulate kind of what they're going through and what their lived experience is. And they end up responding with behaviors that are even more challenging than the ADHD behaviors to start with. And then it ends up in this cycle of, well, my kid is rude, my kid is addicted, my kid is whatever it is, right? And it's sort of, it ultimately is because our kids feel disempowered and they don't feel like they can own or do what they want to be able to do with their life.
Yeah. And I think to that point, I think we underestimate how well our kids are able to talk about hard things. And when
1,000%.
we get into a cycle of structure and care, and there are a lot of professionals looking at our kiddos' brains, we sometimes forget that they're our kiddo and they are able to talk about these things and in a way that is insightful and intuitive and brilliant, and we sort of take that away from them before we're able to actually hear them out. And that's all. It's no judgment comes from any of this. It's just like, look at what we can do together.
Look at what's possible. Beautiful, beautiful. We're going to take a quick break here and we'll be right back. Hi, it's Elaine. And if you like this podcast, you'll love our coach approach. Whether you're a parent looking for support or a professional supporting families, we invite you to download a free guide with 12 key coaching tools at impactparents.com/gift. You can begin using a coach approach to help kids become more independent or improve all of your conversations at work and at home. That's impactparents.com/gift. Welcome back, everybody. Our guests are Nikki and Pete of the ADHD Podcast and Unapologetically ADHD, the newest, most fabulous book on the market. And we've been talking about shame. I love the expression you use, Pete, shame hates the sun. And not to shame any of us or our kids, but to understand the impact that shame can have on relationships that we have with our kids and relationships they have with themselves. So maybe we want to shift this to, so how do we address this? What can we do about this? Because most of us are coming to this moment with something under our belts that have had this experience. I know what brought me into this work was that I didn't want kids to feel like what I felt like those first, years as a kid and what I felt like those first years as a parent before I understood what was going on, because it felt so bad. So what can we do to shift it?
I think for me personally in our family, it's asking a lot of questions and not, how do I want to say it? You're still the parent, but you're taking a step back and asking, what's going on with you instead of, why didn't you study for that test and you got a D and, you could be doing better? Like asking questions about, well, what was the studying like? Did you understand the material? Like, are you understanding it in class? Like, I think asking questions and getting them to talk to us, which is not easy, especially for boys. Boys are not as easy to get to talking to you as girls are. At least not my boy wasn't.
I was going to say, I'm going to challenge that, but
yeah,
go on.
Yeah. my boy was not. But I think it's just taking a step back and trying to pause yourself before you react, and asking these questions and trying to get into conversation with them. Now, this especially, I think when you're looking at like middle school, high school, elementary school, they're not going to have the words to tell you what's going on necessarily. But I just like to ask questions and just really start having a conversation and not having a lot of demands or put the blame on anyone. Because I know they already feel bad. They already, I remember one of my things that my daughter said for her IEP is that she wanted her teachers to know that she was really trying. And I get that. Like she was trying, even if it didn't look like she was. And so that's where I start, is asking questions and trying to take that pause myself so that I don't overreact.
Well, and Nikki, you're not saying this explicitly, but I know that underneath this is like this energy of curiosity rather than interrogation, because I think that,
yes.
We're not talking about asking them a million questions about why they didn't do their homework. It's just kind of like this sort of, wow, it's really interesting. What's going on? And doing it in a way that feels safe for them.
Yeah.
And I know you do that for your kids. So what are the things that you feel like have created that environment where your kids can be more open?
Well, I just like to jump in and talk about this whole emotional and structure separation. I think that's the separation of church and state for dealing with kiddos, figuring out how to thrive and survive and thrive, is if they struggle with performative issues in school, to focus not on how we're feeling as parents that they have gotten a D or an F on a paper or an assignment, but focus first on structure. Let's talk about how you got to this place together. Let's not talk about how I feel inside watching my kid struggle, because I don't care who you are, you're going to feel something when your kid is struggling, right?
So and I'm just wondering what you think about this, because for me, I might say first you start with the emotion of, I bet this feels lousy for you, like feeling the compassion for their experience. So that the emotion may be about acknowledging their emotion instead of worrying about ours.
Right. And that's really it. It's that, I think where kiddos develop that boat of shame is when they see how their parents feel about really themselves, the projection of themselves, of what did I do to let you down? Because this is not good what you did, and you have to feel bad about it, because feeling bad about it is the only way to get better, which is objectively not true. And that's one of the sort of reprogramming things that we have to do. It's all stuff I learned from my parents, right? Like in some subtle way, that's the baggage that I bring. And how do we rewire that?
Was I'm disappointed in you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That was like, that was just knock me over. Just go ahead and hit me. That'd be
right.
better.
That would be easier. Yeah. The whole lesson of, I'm never disappointed in you. I love you. How could I be disappointed in you? You're amazing. Let's talk about what just happened and how, what kind of structure can I help provide that might help you to the next step. That's all I can do.
I'm thinking back to the title of your book, and I have this group that I happen to be in online, and it's a group of humans that are just really compassionate and understanding of each other. And we're literally not allowed to say, I'm sorry. And if somebody comes into the room and says, oh, I'm sorry, we say, you're beautiful, right? It's just a sort of, let's not focus on, I'm sorry. Let's focus on what works. Let's focus on helping you to achieve what you want to be able to achieve and to move forward.
All we're doing as parents is just, Yeah, just deepening our own shame. That's no good either.
Well, and I just want to say it's a real understanding of what ADHD is. How does it impact you? And, as how does it impact your child? How does it impact you when you have it? And that's a lot of what we do in the book and what we do in our show is that, when you partner with it, and you start allowing it to show up and not fight against it and pretend that it's not there, then this load that you've been carrying for so long starts to really lighten. And you can feel good about what you're doing and focus on what is happening during the day and not everything that hasn't happened, because your expectations are more realistic. You're letting the distractions happen. You're letting your ADHD show up. And I think that's a big part of it, is understanding what ADHD is and how does it impact you and how does it impact you on a daily basis. Well, and then you can stop apologizing for it all the time.
And as you're saying that, I want to talk to, I want you guys to talk to the parents out there who are like, ooh, I don't want to label my kid. Ooh, I don't want them to feel like ADHD is an excuse. I don't want them, it's like this sort of, there's a lot of parents who are resistant to the label, or too early, or to whatever else. I mean, what do you say to those parents?
The label is a label, whatever, right? What's the challenge? The challenge is your child is having a hard time getting their homework done. We don't have to say you have ADHD and that's why you're late for your homework. What we need to figure out is what is happening. What is going on in the classroom? Are you listening to when the assignment is being given? Is it written down somewhere? Have you done it, but you forgot to turn it in? I mean, how many people forget to just put their name on the assignment, right? So I don't think it's necessarily, do you have to put a label on it or not? But you got to find out, where are they challenged? What is happening? And that's where you can begin. I don't want people to be embarrassed that they have ADHD. It's not something you should hide from. You should advocate for yourself. If you're having a difficult time with something, then, teaching, especially our young adults, how do you ask for that without having to say, I have ADHD, I need to have only 3 meetings in a day instead of 10, right? But it's more of like my personal productivity and energy is going to be working better for you if I only have 4 meetings in a day. If you start going above 4, you're going to start losing me. I don't have to say I have ADHD to ask for that accommodation, or it's not even an accommodation. It's just how you like to work. So trying to kind of normalize it a little bit. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm like, I think it's more important to focus on what you're doing well and where do you need the support.
I think to add to that, there is a certain degree of our efforts as parents to live inside of fact and truth. And we have the benefit today, something that I did not have when I was a kid, of an extraordinary breadth of language to talk about neurodiversity that just continues to grow. And I feel like if I am worried that I'm labeling my kid by just saying they have a confirmed diagnosis of ADHD, whose weight is that? Whose weight does that sit on? It's not my kiddo. They don't care. They don't know. Right? It's mine. That is just another example of how I feel about what a label has done in my own experience. And so I reject that a little bit, frankly, Diane, that if you're worried about what labeling does to your kid, you might just be putting an unintentional roadblock between them and learning more about who they are, because the words help to an extraordinary degree.
Yeah.
Once you know those words, my God, the world opens up in how you can learn about yourself. And if you are afraid to tell your kid, this is what we think is going on with your brain, you're sort of delaying their opportunity to learn about it.
What I like to say is, if you don't tell your kids what's going on, what they make up is a whole lot worse.
Oh, it's so much worse.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Then you get the shame.
Crazy or stupid.
Yep.
Yeah. We're so good at painting those pictures of the horrible pictures of ourselves. And so let's get out in front of it as best we can.
Yeah.
All right, folks, this is amazing. And I know we could go all day, and can't believe I'm the arbiter of time, but we're way over time. So how can people find out more about you and about your podcast and your book?
Well, we're available.
You do this so well.
We're available everywhere you might want to find a podcast. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Taking Control, the ADHD podcast. We've been around a long, long time. There's 660 some odd episodes for you to choose from as of right now. It's really a library podcast, so search for topics that are interesting to you. We're very proud of all of them. The book is available where you buy books. TakeControlADHD.com/ADHD book, but Barnes & Noble, Amazon, everywhere you want to find a book, you can go order the book. We would love you to check it out. We're very proud of it.
And we'll have the links to all that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Everything will be available at your beck and call with an easy click.
So we've talked about
putting in the show notes, just FYI for people still listening, that there is an article on our site about helping kids learn from mistakes and navigate shame. And there's a 3-step technique to address exactly what we've been talking about that we call the magic 3 questions. So I'm putting that in there too.
Great.
So guys, like we've talked about a lot of different things. Is there something that we've missed that we don't want to end the podcast without making sure we cover, or anything you've talked about already that we want to go back and reiterate?
I feel like we've solved the world's problems.
There we go.
ADHD.
Yay.
We're really good at that. Yeah.
I the one that I've been really thinking a lot about since we started the process of writing the book is how I think about failure and what failure means, because I'm somebody who's come from many years with that particular baggage, is that failure is a deeply emotional and personal judgment against me. And in writing the book and just trying to look at failure and what failure represents as a state, as a binary state that just tells us this is a thing that happened. What can we learn from it? Approaching it more from the scientific perspective of just we're testing a thing, didn't go our way, let's try it again another way. It changes the way I view success, and I find it a little bit more motivating. We write about it in the book. I think it's a really important thing for us to do as kids and adults to sort of rewire our brains on how we think about what failure means and how we can reposition that word as a learning opportunity and not an emotional judgment.
Love that. Nikki, what about you?
We talk a lot about failing forward.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I would say for me, it's the radical acceptance of having and living with ADHD and, understanding what that means for you and partnering with it, embracing it, even when it's hard. And it is hard, right? I mean, it impacts every single piece of your day. But what does that mean for you? What is that radical acceptance? You get to that point where, yes, I have this. It's not going to change. I can't wish it away. I can't fix it. I don't need to be fixed. I am not fixed. I'm not broken, right? We hear that all the time, but it's really getting to that place where you can have that relationship with yourself, that same self-compassion that you would have with someone you loved. Are you talking to yourself the same way you would to your child, to your loved one, your parent, whatever? And most of us are not. And so it's shifting that self-compassion piece too, that we didn't get to talk a lot about today, I think is where I would want to go.
Thank you for that. My friends, we love what you're doing in the world and we love being part of it. So thank you for joining us. And thank you for what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Thank you so much.
Do you guys have a favorite quote or a motto you want to leave our audience with? They always love those.
Well, I mean, I got one that I live by, and it goes a little something like this. Hey now, don't do that. Don't be mean. You don't have to be mean, because remember, no matter where you go, there you are. As spoken by the great Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension. Wherever you go, there you are.
Okay. See, I have no idea what that means. None of it.
Totally get
But
it.
I love it, even though I don't know what it means.
But that's Pete's motto.
I don't know the reference.
It does not surprise me at all. Nikki, what about you?
You're welcome, everybody. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Corollary to that is you can't get there from here.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so funny. Well, right now, it is a question on a sticky note that I have about where is my joy? And so when I am working and, I'm having a hard time working, sometimes, where's my joy? And it brings me back to the intention of the work that we do. And that gets me going again.
Love that.
All right, everybody. Our guests have been Nikki and Pete, the authors of Unapologetically ADHD and the ADHD Podcast. We're All People Podcast. And for those of you listening, so again, Nikki, Pete, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Take a moment to tune in. What were you hearing or feeling or experiencing in this conversation that's jumping out at you? What's your aha or your gem? What are you taking away from today that you want to bring forward with you into your life?
And as we close every podcast, thank you for what you're doing for yourself and for your kids. At the end of the day, you make a difference.
Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast.
Behavior therapy training for parents is actually recommended as a first-line treatment for complex kids. For information about Sanity School, our training program for parents or teachers, which has helped thousands of families around the globe, visit impactparents.com/Sanity School.